Hello, I'm Catherine Lawton. Welcome to my poetry workshop. Last time I presented this poetry workshop was at the Colorado Christian Writers Conference. And in my class there, I had quite a few different people. So I like to imagine that maybe in this class also, which is virtual, we'll have some of the similar people. We had at that time um, a minister or two who wrote poems for their denominational magazines and who wrote um, song lyrics, which someone set to music and they sang in church. We had some retired teachers who had been teaching poetry and now decided they'd like to try making a second career of writing poetry and sharing it. We had some people who had been writing verse for a long time and wanted to improve their poetry and learn to share it and market it and publish it. We had some people who were just prose writers, actually, mostly, and wanted to learn to a little more about another field of writing. And I really do recommend that because writing poetry does help you with all your other writing. I'll include a page about that in my handouts, which you can look for along with this workshop. So I'm thinking that maybe this class is quite diverse also, and I'm going to share with you some of my suggestions for poetry writing and for being a poet. First of all, I, as a poet, started in my childhood writing poetry. I had my first piece published nationally when I was 12 years old at the encouragement of a Sunday school teacher. I submitted my poem and my parents said, oh, don't get your hopes up. It's not likely. No, very few people get published. So when it came out, it was extremely encouraging to me and to them. Since then, I've had many things published throughout my life and continue to. How to improve your poetry. First of all, I recommend that you maintain a sense of wonder. Poetry is distilled language. It uses poetic imagery, it uses rhythm, various types of rhyme or not, though I like rhyme, at least internal rhyme, at least occasional rhyme. It's important not to let as Mary Harwell Saylor says, don't let your rhymes control your lines, but use them when they flow naturally, when they come naturally with what it is you want to say. There are many sources that you can search out, and I will give you some material in my handouts for learning more about poetic techniques, to learn about metaphor and simile and forms such as free verse, haiku, narrative poetry, prose poetry, song lyrics, etc. These are things you can learn about and do, and I encourage you to try them all. The thing is, all types of poetry need to connect with the reader on an emotional level or an imaginative level. They compel the reader to see or think or consider something in a new way. Poetry does express wonder, which is the capacity to be curious and to be joyously surprised at the unusual in the commonplace, to desire to share it then with others. So look for the extraordinary in the ordinary. And if you are a poet, and it is a gift, poems will come to you as you're attentive. Then write it down as it comes, and later go back and revise it, reword it, rework it, edit it to be the best and the most concise you can make it. These are practices I recommend. Number one, maintain that sense of wonder, even a childlike sense of wonder. Thomas Carlyle once said that Wonder is the basis of worship. And I think I was thinking that way when I wrote the introduction to my latest poetry book, which is Glimpsing Glory, poems of living and dying, praying and playing, belonging and longing. What do I mean by glory? A taste, a flicker, a glimpse, a glimmer, a flash, a whisper, a rustling breeze, a fleeting moment that lingers on taste buds, nerve ends, rides over tones of sound, tingles with goosebumps of closeness, surprise, recognition. The Shekinah glory filled the temple. Our bodies are temples. Moses' face shone with the glory of God, speaking to God face to face. God is for us, with us, in us, among us, but only in the glimpses, usually coming uninvited, unexpected, are we aware of God's presence and God's mysteries and surprises. We may be awakened in momentary sensory experiences as the Spirit hovers over our chaos of beauty, living things, words spoken, thin places. Glory is used to describe heaven or the other world, another dimension, perhaps a parallel world and existence. The veil that separates the two seems thick at times and thin at others. It felt thick the day my father died, and in times of stress, worry, crisis, until later when I look back and realize the voice I heard, the hand that led, the way of escape that opened, were touches of glory in the darkness, the hard places, in the fog. When I heard the stars sing, the veil was thin. From glory to glory, wrote St. Paul, or gloire en gloire, as I heard it preached in French. Glory! As a child, I heard the old saints exclaim. If I don't praise him, the rocks are going to cry out glory and honor, said an old spiritual song in choir years ago. The Lamb who was slain is worthy to receive glory, heard John in his revelatory vision. The glory and the freshness of a dream, but yet I know where'er I go that there hath passed away a glory from the earth, where it is now, the glory in the dream. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home, wrote Wordsworth, intimating immortality. Perhaps the realm of glory isn't completely different or separate from this one. Perhaps all that is highest and best here, good and true and beautiful, is also found beyond the veil. On this side, foretastes whet appetites, clarify hopes, inspire visions, create and are created by community. Glory is where Eden, peace, wholeness, light, fellowship, union dwell. Glory is worth regarding slowly, savoring, and embracing savingly. Moments when we experience glimpses are worth holding, treasuring, sharing. Another practice I recommend is daily meditative type prayer, contemplation or centering prayer. The life of listening to God, listening to your own inner life, listening to others, listening to nature even, is a creative life. It's a teachable life. It's open-hearted life and open to surprises out of which poetry comes. Say yes to life, even with its suffering and sadness. Number 3, be attentive to everything around you, listening in a sense with all your senses, through touch, sight, smell, taste and sound. Listen to your intuitions, your imaginations, your reasonings. Number 4, nurture a sensitivity to beauty, which includes awe, wonder, zest for life, love, and meaning. First and foremost, though, take time. Be attentive. Listen. I think I was listening in that way when I wrote this poem, Breathing. Wind not blowing entered my being in a rain-soaked, old-growth redwood forest. As I inhaled sweetness of damp sorrel, dank ferns, deep-needled floor, and wisdom of ancient trees, their roots intertwined, their heads drinking coastal clouds, as sun rays streamed, sighed through fog into that timeless, conscious moment, grounded. Another practice I recommend is journaling. Combine journaling with listening and meditative prayer. Later, you go through your journal and you'll find the makings of poems. I recommend. I guarantee. Number 6, another suggestion is that you have fun playing with words. Experiment with words. Experiment with sound. Experiment with how they roll off your tongue. Try different poetic forms. Write a haiku for fun. Try writing a sonnet. Try writing a found poem. For instance, in this past year, I was asked to submit an essay to a collection of essays, a book acquaintance of mine, a theologian, was putting together. And this is basically theological thoughts for the laity. And it has to do with how we cooperate with God, not just do things for God, work for God, work unto God, but work with God. And I said I would do it. And they said to try to be creative in our essay writing. I was, during that time, reading back through my journal and found several pages in a row where I just let my thoughts come out in phrases, words, basically kind of poetic thoughts of what I was thinking along those very lines of working with God and to change this world. And I thought, I could write a poem. I could do this in a poetic way. So I found out, actually, that poetic essays are kind of a thing right now, or they're called lyric essays. They're big in academic settings, but I think they can be used anywhere. And it was a challenge because it was a long essay, but it's all written in a rather poetic form and sound. And after several drafts, it came together and it's going to come out. And what my hope is that because it looks different on the page, it will get attention. Because it sounds different when you read it, that somehow it will say more to the person reading it, not just dense words filling the page, that it will be something unique and fresh. And somehow possibly communicate the truths even more effectively, which I think poetry can do. So I encourage you to try it and try different things and be fresh in your approach. Okay, number 7. An important practice for publishing, or that is polishing your poetry, is to read it out loud. Listen to it when you read it. Poetry is something to be heard as much as seen, even more to be heard. So you think about how it looks on the page for sure. Is it attractive? Is there interesting form? Is there variety? But also, how does it sound? And is there punctuation needed so that it will make sense, so that the lines will flow right and make sense? Should you reduce or increase the number of beats in a line? Does it come out with rhythm? Vary the indentations of the line. Check for word choices. agreement of person and tense, etc., just as you do with all your writing. Word choices are important in every kind of writing. Words are our building blocks of writing. So every word should be the best word it can be. It should be the most descriptive, the most representative of your thought, with the most correct denotation and connotation that you're wanting to get across. The most powerful, strong, punch-giving word. Ask yourself in your poem, with every poem, what is the central image or theme or experience or thought I am attempting to get across with this poem? Every poem will have a central image and thought and experience that you are getting across. So be sure that the whole poem works toward that end, toward that one theme, that one purpose. Sometimes the words we use may jar. There's a place for that. Sometimes they surprise, certainly. Sometimes they even mystify and prompt thought. Hopefully, they arouse feelings. They arouse delight in the senses. Use all the senses. Sometimes they incite thought, or they incite gratitude and praise. So, number 8 is honesty. Be emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually honest in your feelings, in your insights, in what you share in your poetry. If you are, others will relate to it. They will get it. Think of your experience as a microcosm of the whole of experience of humanity. It will be representative. Sometimes we try too hard to impress. We try too hard to be clear or to be vague and oblique, which isn't a real good idea either. But just be honest, be concrete, succinct, be creative, just as you can be yourself in all these ways, and it will speak. Your poetry will speak. Number 9, the last of this list is consider and put into words what you are writing the poetry for. Why are you writing poetry? Why are you writing this poetry? For a book, I think it's important to add an introduction from the poet about the poems in the book. I have a short introduction in my book, Remembering Softly, A Life in Poems, and this is what it says. Those of us who enjoy poetry and who compose poetry do so because for us, nothing quite distills the feelings of a moment as does a piece of rhyming or free verse with its sense, sound, and form. A poem comes from some place in the heart, and as it is read, it reveals something about the heart. Like music, it may employ major or minor tones. I hope at least one of the poems in this volume, selected expressions from each stage of my life, will touch a chord for the reader, perhaps a major key of delight and consolation, perhaps minor overtones of grief or longing. May you find something here to illumine your path and lighten your soul at whatever place of life you find yourself. From my wanderings in and wondering about nature, from opening more and more to the divine, from faith, family, and friends, out of noisy living and quiet places has come whelming emotions, questionings and questings, has come poems to help cope, to make sense of it all, to ennoble life. In crisis has come hope, in fear has come faith, in fragility has come strength. In joy has come affirmation, in loss has come bounteous grace. Excuse me. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about marketing and sharing your poetry. There's way too much to say in the short time I have. So check out my handout. But poetry has been making a comeback in the last few years, partly because of the online poet and Instagram poet Rupi Kaur, and the spoken word poems that are being shared, and for a number of high-profile poets that have been making poetry more popular in these days. I think there is a hunger for the unique truths and humanity that poetry provides. I think people are hungry for deeper meaning in life that they can find, hopefully, in poetry. To find meaning in the chaos, certainly, of current events. I would say another thing to really keep in mind is that success in poetry has far more to do than with sales numbers. Poetry books are still somewhat of a hard sell, though we are working at it. My line of poems, my line of poetry books with Cladak Publishing is Agate's poetry. And we have a number of books now on our list, and they're doing fairly well. They open opportunities for authors. So that's part of the success of your poetry, is that it opens opportunities for you, that it connects you with community, with other poets, with your listeners when you read the poems, either in person or online. And when you share poems, it's all about community, because when you share a poem and it means something to you, it may actually take on even different meaning to the people reading it or listening to it. And we need to let our poems be free to do that. Let them take on meaning for other people. Let them find meaning in it that has significance to them. So it is really a community thing, poetry is, and it connects us. It is a participatory thing, the reader and the writer, and the beauty of the moment. Specific ways to share your poetry are through blogs, and many poets are finding blogging to be an effective way to share their poetry. And you can look those up. You can search other bloggers and learn from them. There are many magazines and journals that still want poems. I suggest getting this book, Poets Market. This is the 2020 version that comes out annually, I think. But it's just chock full of markets for poetry. Many, many markets where they want poems and they have a particular kind they want. And you're going to find markets for your kind of poetry. And so research the markets and submit. There are a number of journals, poetry journals. I have found, well, they're in the Poetry Market book, but new ones keep arising. Some die out and new ones are born constantly. I have found Twitter, as frustrating as Twitter can be, is one place to connect with poets and poetry journals and learn about poetry contests, poetry groups to join. And there's an active poetry group on Goodreads. I will give you a handout with the list of resources. So look those up and follow through with them and enjoy. I want to read one more poem to you to close. This one is called In the Cleft of a Cold White Rock. And I think this time we've been through with the pandemic and now coming out of it, we've kind of felt at times we're kind of closed in and sort of between a rock and a hard place as writers, maybe, and as people. And maybe this is a poem you can relate to. As in the close space between the dawn and dusk of a January day, when hoar-frosted trees have their feet in snow and their branches raised against a white, weighty sky. A crevice of blue breaks, and frosted arms sparkle. So I find myself pressed between granite slabs, as it were, longing for warm feet, for light to lift and reassure. God put Moses in the cleft of a rock and showed him his back. I desire to see his face also. Then, like a split of brilliance in the clouds, his hand lifts, and I see his trailing glory, and that he has been here all along. And I know without seeing that he is smiling. May God smile on you as you write your poetry, and enjoy, and God bless you as you write and as you share your poetry. I would love to hear from you.